I wanted to give an update on my progress so far with Elden Ring. Typically, I do what I call my first look videos, where I just give the first maybe 5 or so hours of kind of my gameplay, and then I usually come back at the end for a final review. Elden Ring is so dense, though, and in a very good way. I still have a long ways to go, but I feel like I wanted to give an update. One, because I need to put a video out for today, and two, because I really want to sing some of the praise. And there were some early criticisms I have that aren't as bad as I initially thought. And there are also a lot of really cool things going on here that I wasn't initially aware of. I won't be getting into any spoilers or anything. The gameplay you're looking at here is about 70 hours into the game, if you can believe it. And based on my looking at the map and how long I have personally taken to explore to where I am at right now, I anticipate easily another 100 or so hours, which puts me on par with some of my other Dark Souls games, although those games were mostly because of grinding, especially at the end of Dark Souls 1. I think I grinded like another 50 or so hours in Souls just to be able to take a little bit more damage against the final boss because I found it to be that punishing. However, this game doesn't really feel like I'm grinding. As you could see from the gameplay footage here, I'm actively exploring. I'm going out and around and I'm fighting enemies to, loot enemies by killing them. I'm checking out encampments. I'm looking for caves. I'm looking for crafting materials. I'm looking for anything scattered in the world. And in just this short amount of time, I find a lot of trouble and I get into it. And there's a couple times that I die. And I go back on my horse and I mosey my way back over to where I died. And I learn from my mistakes and I proceed to become better and better. And that's what this game has really been about. It's a lot of frustration early on, followed by some patience, and ultimately some reward. You're going to start finding things, whether they be weapons or whether they be shards that allow you to power up your weapons, or even just experience orb type things that give you levels faster. Everywhere you go in this world, the lands between, every nook and cranny, every cliffside, every enemy you fight is a chance to make yourself that much better. And I absolutely love this game for that. One of the things that frustrated me so much with Breath of the Wild was that while it was a very fun game to explore and walk around the world, it never felt like I was truly leveling up my character. The toolbox that I got at the beginning of the game, when I left the Great Plateau, was the same toolbox I beat Calamity Ganon with. It was the same weapons that I found early on in the game, with the exception of maybe a few glass weapons, and the Master Sword, of course, were the same weapons that I finished the game with. Yes, I had more hearts. Yes, I got a little bit better armor from upgrading with fairies and stuff, but not in the way that Elden Ring does it. The list of weapons that I can select from are massive. Swords, flails, guns, bows and arrows, spears, shields. And that's just the melee side. Then on the magic side, which I am not currently even speccing towards, you have a litany of spells, both offensive and defensive, that will radically change the way you play the game. On top of that, you have the Ashes of War, which are insane modifiers, not just from the perspective of how much damage you do with a particular weapon, but what the special ability of that weapon is. And on a dime, you will find a piece of gear that will radically change the way you play the game. And I really like that. But if you're like me, and I did say I was going to say sword and board, and I've stayed true to my build, if you're like me, you're speccing a lot of points into health, a lot of points into strength, a lot of points into endurance. It's going to allow you to hold the biggest, heaviest armor, have a nice, healthy stamina pool to get that 100% physical block, and then retaliate with some massive bombs. Now, I am not using my traditional big two-handed sword, which, thanks to the sheer amount of upgrading I've done, is actually now a great one-handed sword. I'm going back to my katana because I like it. It hits a little bit faster, and it is upgraded pretty well. But you could see here that I'm dispatching enemies with relative ease out in the field. A lot of these enemies are weaker enemies that are just kind of, I'd almost say ambiance enemies. However, you do see that I do die. They're not. There are enemies that are definitely tougher that are put in strategic checkpoints. Wherever the map kind of converges into a specific point or into a specific area, that's where you're going to find some of the more tough enemies, and those are the ones that give me the most trouble. But they're also the ones that give you the greatest reward, the greatest chance at loot drops, ashes of war, just general money to upgrade your character. Those are the ones that you're going to be hunting. The other ones are just kind of like trash mobs, if you want to think of these as more like field bosses. Additionally, there are some places where you will just fight against full-fledged bosses with a full health bar at the bottom, a huge introduction, a great orchestra, like a cinematic almost explosion onto the screen. And those are fun as well and completely unexpected. The amount of times that I'm just out doing my own thing and all of a sudden a giant dragon comes flying down and crashing through the trees, or an enemy just summons out of nowhere, or a headless horseman or a dark knight or something that is named comes after me, it's massive. I think I'd read that there's over 100 bosses in this game, maybe like 130 or 140. I believe it. Not all of them are home runs, of course. I'm not here to say that every single enemy in the game is the best design ever. I think, unfortunately, in times, this game does suffer from a quantity over quality, as were other Dark Souls games were definitely much more quality over quantity, much tighter designed maps with more elaborate, detailed, difficult bosses with distinct fighting patterns and phases. Here, for the most part, you're going to be able to find an enemy that you can run around from behind and hit him in the butt, which has kind of been the age-old way to beat a Dark Souls game. Obviously, now with my incredibly powerful weapons, I don't have to hit them very much. However, even with all of the upgrades I have done to my vitality and to my armor set, I still don't take a lot of damage before I die. And there are a lot of status effects that are present in the game that will kill you too. You'll turn into stone, or you'll get the scarlet rot, or you'll get poison, or other things that just either instantly kill you or do chip away at your health pool. So you're constantly drinking potions, which typically means you're going to die. All of this stuff is awesome. I can't say enough good things about this game. I can't say how fun it is just without showing you some more gameplay, and that's what this video is intended to do. Now, the frustrations that I had with the initial part of the open world unfortunately still exist. Patch version 103 recently dropped on the PlayStation 5, which is where I'm playing here. And one of the things that it mentioned was it improved some of the overall experience. And I got really excited. I was like, is this the patch where they finally drop down the fidelity a little bit more and give us a more stable frame rate? The answer is no. It's still jittery and juddery when you're out in the open world on your horse Torrent out exploring. And while a majority of the game does involve that, I feel like the mitigation to that is not sprinting with your horse and, if possible, walking, which is such a frustrating workaround because horse combat is incredibly satisfying in this game. It's very simple to pull off and feel like a total badass. However, I found that when you're on foot and the frames aren't being thrown at you at Mach speeds, the game does respond better. Ultimately, the best parts of this game are not in the open world, and while the lands between is fun to walk around and explore and to finding new sites of grace and finding new treasures kind of tucked in around the world, the real home run of this game is always going to be in the dungeons that are both the legacy dungeons, which are the huge established kind of end game dungeons that the game wants you to focus on, as well as the smaller sets of caves and other sites of interest that you'll repeatedly see. A lot of times you'll find an encampment with a staircase that leads down into a difficult boss that gives you an item. or you'll find a cave that has a small group of enemies that leads you to a difficult boss or something along those lines. That is where the bread and butter of this game is. It's almost like this built-in tower rush mode on top of a great open world game, because there is really nothing more satisfying and honestly the most endearing thing I think anybody can say about an open world game is that it's satisfying and fun to play. And how does that satisfying loop hook in? Is it just the fact that the music was great and the graphics were great and you play the game for the sake of playing the game? Maybe. In this case, satisfying absolutely means getting more loot, getting more pieces of gear to change the way your character is played. Now, there are so many different paths to victory in this game. There are so many different quest lines that you could take on, and some of the NPCs that you meet and some of the things that they have you do are absolutely baffling and confusing, and I think that's some of the fun and the mystery of this game. A lot of times NPCs will speak in tongues. There won't be a big marker on your map. There's not even a quest log. You actually have to write this stuff down on your own. I'm using my cell phone to write notes for myself. But it's very easy to talk to an NPC, have them tell you to do something, and then you totally forget about it. However, for those who do take their time to go through the world and to kind of work their way through these NPC quests, there's actually some really good gear and some really good lore of the world that is given to you. This game does still feature a very heavy emphasis on item description. As you read an item, it will give you a small amount of lore into kind of how this item or these group of people fit into the larger narrative. However, with the sheer number of NPCs that are scattered everywhere in this game, you're also going to find a lot of story elements from them too. Not all of them are honest to you. Not all of them have pure intentions or motivations. And it's kind of up to you to kind of navigate through this and figure out what kind of character you want to be. That's not to say that doing a quest for one NPC instantly shuts out another quest tree or anything along those lines, but some of the requests you're going to get, particularly those in the Volcano Manor, really do make you kind of question what's the point of this game. And if you are a fan of any Dark Souls games, you know that the very end of the game always puts you with a very important decision to make. And this game, I feel like it does that as well, but more frequently, maybe with less bravado, maybe with less, of that ultimatum, the way that the original Dark Souls games did. But absolutely in this game, you're constantly being kind of challenged of like, what kind of player do you want to be? Do you want to defend the innocent? Do you want to kill and prey on the innocent? Do you want to be a friend to all or a friend to most? Do you want to reject some things that are inherently evil and instead align yourself with things that are inherently good? I suspect there's a lot of navigation through this and hidden bosses and hidden lore and hidden weapons that will radically change the way you play. And all those rewards feel satisfying. Everything that I've done, some of the more epic quest lines, have led me to some really cool pieces of gear that have made me think about how I want to build my character. I'm going to stick with sword and board. It's all I know. And maybe one day I'll re-roll a faith character or a wizard type character, but I've always felt most comfortable in this game carrying a massive 100% physical reduction shield, always held up in front of me with a large health pool and a large set of armor to protect myself just in the event my shield isn't up when I get hit. That's how I play this game. There are people who are speedrunning this game naked. There are people who do max 2 intelligence. That's, I think, the fun of this game. There are so many paths to victory. You can do how you want to beat this game is so many different ways. You could be a pure caster, pure melee, a hybrid, something in between. Easily, this is one of my top 10 games. Easily. I'm going to hold final judgment and a final review until I finish the story and see what kind of emotional impact it leaves me with. But just exploring the world and building up my character and building my legend as I find so many caves and hidden areas and pieces of gear and NPCs. The world so densely packed with stuff to do. Every play session, whether it's 5 minutes or 5 hours, I always feel like I'm finding something and I'm being rewarded for taking on tough bosses and going down the path least traveled, or scaling down cliff sides. The level of design in this game is absolutely masterclass. So there you have it. That's my thoughts on Elden Ring. About 70 or so hours into my experience. Still have a long ways to go. I'll be back again at some point in the future with probably a set of final thoughts. I don't really know if there's anything else that I can radically comment on that's going to change. I don't feel like doing any guides or anything like that. But if you haven't yet played this game for whatever reason, if you're afraid that a Dark Souls game is too difficult for you, if you're afraid that a game like this is going to be too punishing, I'll tell you that the beginning is hard, but stick with it. Find a set of gear and a set of abilities that you're comfortable with, and before long you will be having just as much fun as I am. Relatively, I don't want to say fearless, because I still do die quite a bit, but competent in your abilities to explore. So check this game out, because it's definitely something special. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.